Hi guys, James at Goddard Radio Moscow Beer and Metal Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to go back down to Melbourne in Victoria and revisit one of the breweries I did for you a few videos ago. So we're going to return to Hawthorn Brewing Company and have a taste of their Australian IPA. And I need to thank Pete Willis from the Hawthorn Brewing Company for sending me these beers. I sent them my review of the Pilsner one, which was a really nice interpretation of the style, and they actually sent me another 3 bottles of their beers to review, so a big thank you to the Hawthorn Brewing Company for doing that for me. But as is usual then with my reviews, I'll take you through a very kind of brief history of the brewery, just a few short facts and things like that. The brewery website's in the video description for you below if you're interested in that, but just fast forward to the tasting if that's what you want to see. So anyway, as I mentioned to you, Hawthorn Brewing Company are based in Melbourne and they're in the eastern suburb of Hawthorn, as you might have guessed. And the brewery was founded by 3 friends, Darren Milo, Pete Willis and Hamish Rood, and they all actually had a history of home brewing. And these guys had been involved in the corporate world, so they used their connections there to establish their brewery. And they founded this company back in 2008 with the first beer, the Pale Ale, being released in mid-2009. Now the labelling and branding apparently was designed by Leo Burnett, and it's meant to be a sort of piss take on modern beers, all the macro lagers and things, and it says on the bottle imported from Hawthorn and also premium flavour as well, so these things are intended as a piss take. But the company actually is a bit of a gypsy brewery at the moment, if you like. They've been trying to find a permanent home for themselves, and they brew most of their beer up at the Mildura Bay Brewery away up in northwestern Victoria, and they do also brew some of their beer at Southern Bay Brewery as well. But when they introduce their new beers, they tend to bring them in as a seasonal keg to test the market, and then if they're successful they release them in the bottle the following year. So that's your kind of very brief history of the Hawthorn Brewing Company there. Just to list the beers that are in the core range from these guys, you've got this guy here, the Australian IPA, you have the Golden Ale, the Pilsner, the Premium Pale Ale, Amber Ale and also the Wit Beer as well. So I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a wee quick look at the artwork on this one, as we always do. It's exactly the same as the Pilsner one, except the difference being with all your beers is that you get a different colour on the label here. So this guy is purple and the Pilsner was a kind of dark greenish colour if I remember rightly. But yeah, it's got the nice kind of ship on it there. You can see the Hawthorn Brewing Company, that's their ship there. I forget what the name of the ship was, it did say on the website, but it says on the back of it, in the tradition of travelling merchants of old, the flavour merchants crisscrossed the globe to bring home the secret of the world's best brewers. It is only by trialling and refining these techniques that we are able to create beers of such distinction. Like this Australian IPA, rich and bold in flavour and featuring 4 unique Australian hops, another world-class Australian craft beer. Follow the trail of the flavour merchants at hawthornbrewing.com.au, and it gives you their address, which is at Glenferrie Road in Hawthorn, which, as I mentioned to you, is in the eastern part of Melbourne. So we'll get this guy out and get on with the tasting here. One thing I would actually quite like Hawthorn to do, and they probably will watch the review, is I really would like them to kind of list their different hops on these bottles, because as a reviewer you can actually get quite a bit of you can sometimes talk a little bit about the hops and things and say what you expect and how these things kind of come out and what flavour comes from what hop. But some breweries do it, some breweries don't. But I always think personally it's a good thing to do, and if you are into your beers and brewing and stuff, it is quite an interesting thing. So as you can see, it's poured a nice kind of hazy, quite rich, dark amber colour. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see there it's not really transparent at all, and it does have a good aroma coming off it just without even concentrating on that too much. You've got a nice finger of a frothy white head there that I think is going to hold pretty strong. It is very, very frothy, and there is actually quite a lot of carbonation just kind of coming up from the bottom of the glass on this one. This is my schooner glass. For those of you watching back home, the schooner glass is a little bit smaller than a pint. It's almost like a sort of 2/3 or 3/4 of a pint glass actually. But yeah, it looks really, really attractive beer, so we'll give it a smell and see what it's like. Yeah, it's exactly what you would expect from the kind of from the IPA series. The only other Australian pale ale I think that I've reviewed was actually from Weird Beer Company, a brewing company in London, and it was called Sharkbait, and it was a really, really nice beer. So hopefully I can expand a little bit on the difference in that style. But yeah, you've got a lot of kind of tropical fruits. This guy is 5.8% in alcohol, by the way. I forgot to mention that. But it's a 5.8% Australian IPA. but you've got a lot of fruity character kind of coming out of this one. It's a lot of kind of, it definitely has a little bit of kind of peachy sweetness in it, I would say. Yeah, there's definitely peachiness in there, but you do have kind of grapefruit, and I would say maybe sort of the kind of passion fruit things, and that's one of the things you can always talk about a little bit, as I said, with the hops. If you know the hops, you know the sort of acid makeup that's in the beer, and usually you can tell what fruits you'll get out of this one. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of sweet, kind of mango-y, passion fruit and grapefruit in there, but I think there is definitely a kind of like peaches sticking out to me with this one. But there's a little bit of underlying citrus as well. It's quite a big aroma, and I found that with their Pils beer as well. The Pils beer had a really nice big hoppy aroma in it. But there's definitely a little bit of a kind of grassy and aromatic-y note coming out too, and you can pick up just a little bit of the kind of sweet bready malts. If you just take it in and you get that sort of deeper aroma from it, you can really you can really pick up the kind of nice bready malts on it. But anyway, let's give it a taste and see how we get on. Yeah, you've got a really nice big bitter hoppy character, which is what you'd expect. The one thing that's striking me about it actually as it comes in is that it is quite smooth. Most of these pale ale beers do have a little bit more of a bite to it, but this is really quite smooth, and it is quite nice actually. I quite like the way that mouthfeel complements the flavour. But yeah, you've got a nice sort of passion fruit and grapefruit in there. There is a little bit of kind of pine resiny flavour coming through as well, just around the edges of the tongue. The kind of fruity feel, the sort of bittery fruit character is right around the edge of the tongue, and that's the main component in the flavour of this beer. It's really nice actually, a very smooth pale ale. Yeah, there is definitely that sort of resinous pine in there, and there is just a little bit of kind of underlying kind of white bready malts, and they just blanket the tongue. It's almost like a pale malt base actually, just a mix of a kind of sweet bready and pale malt base, almost like you would expect from a Pils beer actually. So it's quite interesting in that regard. Maybe that's the kind of sort of trademark of the Australian one, is to have that more of a bready malt base. But yeah, it does almost have a kind of similar feel to the Pils beer actually. It's a nice big hoppy beer with quite a nice smooth malt base. So although it's a different style of beer, it does have the same sort of feel, if it makes sense. So you do start to get an idea of how these guys like to brew their beer, and I quite like the way they do it. But yeah, you've got a nice big grapefruity, passion fruit kind of, more grapefruity actually I should say. It's more of a grapefruity flavour that just goes right around the edge of the tongue, and a nice blanket of a nice pale malt flavour. It's a really, really nicely done beer. The flavours blend together really well in this one, and it's quite a sessionable pale ale. I would really love to actually try it on tap at some point. That would be a really interesting comparison to make, but you know, from the flavour profile, it's a really, really excellent beer in my opinion. I would happily drink quite a few of these in a night. But to tell you about the actual mouthfeel of this one, I would definitely say it's light to mid-bodied, maybe pushing the mid-bodied actually, just because of the smooth mouthfeel that it has. The carbonation I would say is quite light. As I said, it's very smooth, but it's got a nice oily feel to it as well, and that helps bring out the kind of nice pine resiny and grapefruit flavours around the edge of the tongue. There is perhaps just a little bit of kind of grassy character, grassy and aromatic, kind of blending in with that grapefruit flavour, but I think the more prominent component of the flavour is definitely the grapefruit. But you do get just a good bit of dryness on the tongue with this one, particularly around the edges, but it does have a nice kind of, it leaves a nice kind of dry flavour in your mouth, which is what you expect from this style of beer. They're meant to be big, hoppy, bitter beers. So overall, it's a really nice beer. It's definitely different in flavour from the American and English variants, and as I would say, I think maybe that's the sort of slightly pale malt, bready malt base that's coming out on this one. But what's interesting about these guys is that you definitely get a feel for the style that they like brewing. They like a more mild malt base, but to focus more on the hoppy character, which a lot of people, really like that kind of character in their beers, and I'm no exception to that. I can appreciate both ends, where you've got a nice malty beer and a nice hoppy beer. But anyway, this has been a really nice beer to review for you, and I probably will go and buy a 6-pack of this at some point when I see it again, because it is really, really good. So as always, please let me know in the comment section your own thoughts on this beer. It's always interesting to hear that. Thank you again to the Hawthorn Brewing Company for sending me these beers. And you will get another 2 reviews from these guys in the near future. But please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I will catch you soon with my next one. Cheers.